She was dragging a sack of firewood through freezing rain, her uniform soaked, her eyes full of ghosts. He was a single dad on his way home until he stopped. What he discovered that night would change not only her life, but his own in ways no one could have imagined. The rain was not falling, it was attacking. Each drop slammed into the pavement with the force of a small hammer, and the wind howled through the narrow streets of Halstead, Kansas, like it was mourning something the world had already forgotten. Eli Brooks gripped the steering wheel tighter, squinting through the blurry windshield of his aging Chevy pickup. His daughter Maya was in the passenger seat fast asleep, her head tilted against the window, a stuffed moose clutched in her arms. He was just 2 turns away from home when he saw her, a figure, moving alone against the rain. No, not just moving, dragging. Eli slammed on the brakes. The woman was hunched over a massive sack slung across her back. No umbrella, no coat, just a soaked military uniform, and the desperate determination of someone running on fumes. Her boots splashed through the water, pooling along the curb knees, buckling slightly with each step. And then she stumbled. Hard. She fell to her knees on the sidewalk, the sack thudding behind her, soaked wood spilling out. Eli was already out of the truck before the engine stopped. "Ma'am," he called, jogging toward her, his boots splashing through the icy water. "Are you all right? Can I help you?" She didn't look up, just clutched one of the logs to her chest like it was a child. Her voice, when it came, was low, trembling. "They're not firewood." "Not really." Eli crouched beside her. She was young, maybe mid-20s, her hair pulled back, soaked against her pale skin. Her lips were blue from the cold. "What are they, then?" he asked gently. Her hands tightened around the log. She looked at him finally. And her eyes, Lord. They weren't crying. They were already past crying. Their names, she whispered. Each one is a name. The street was empty. The rain was relentless, and Eli Brooks, a man who had buried a wife, raised a daughter alone, and thought he'd seen the worst of winter, realized he was looking at someone who had walked through a different kind of storm altogether. He helped her into the truck without another word. Her body was shaking. She didn't thank him, just held the log like it might vanish if she let go. Maya stirred as the door closed beside her. Her sleepy voice broke the silence. "Daddy, who's she?" Eli didn't answer right away. He looked into the rearview mirror where the soaked stranger sat hunched with her sack on her lap. "She's a soldier," he said softly. "And she's cold." Back at his modest 2-bedroom home, Eli led her inside, while Maya hurried off to her room to change. The woman stood in the entryway, dripping on the mat sack still on her back. "Take it off," Eli said kindly. "It's all right. You're safe now." She shook her head. "I can't." "Yes, you can. I can't." Her voice cracked. "I lost too many of them already." Eli stepped closer, not touching her, but steady. "Then let me carry them, just for a while." Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then slowly she slipped the sack from her shoulders and let it fall. The wood scattered gently across the floor, revealing names carved with care. Donovan Miles, Red Junebug. Maya peeked out from behind the hallway door. "Why are there names on the wood?" she asked, wide-eyed. The woman knelt on the floor beside the logs. She touched one gently, as if afraid it might dissolve. "Because they were all I had," she said. "They were my unit. My family. When they died, I started carving their names. So I wouldn't forget how their voices sounded." Maya, in all her 8-year-old honesty, asked, "Do you miss them every day?" The soldier looked up at her, and for the first time her eyes softened. "Every breath," she said. Later that night, after Maya was asleep and the rain finally let up, Eli handed the woman a mug of tea. "You got a name?" he asked. "Leah," she replied. "Sergeant Leah Monroe," he nodded. "I'm Eli." That was Maya. She sipped the tea. You didn't have to stop. No, he agreed. But I saw someone carrying grief like it weighed a lifetime, and I've carried that kind of load before. Leah looked down at the cup, then at the fire now flickering in the hearth. I didn't know where I was going, she admitted. I just kept walking. Like maybe if I kept walking the names would stop following me. Eli set his mug down. They followed you because you remembered them. And maybe that's the kind of carrying no one teaches you how to let go of. Leah's voice was barely a whisper. What if I don't want to let go? He looked at her long and quiet, then said the words that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Then don't. But don't burn what you can plant. She stared at him. Eli stood. There's a couch, a blanket, and a roof. Stay the night. We'll talk about where the names should go in the morning. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. And outside, for the first time in hours, the rain finally stopped. Morning crept in slowly, quiet and cautious, as if unsure whether it was welcome. The rain had left everything washed out and muted. Outside Eli's modest home, the grass was still wet, and the maple tree in the front yard dripped gently one leaf at a time. Inside, the smell of black coffee and sizzling eggs floated through the air like a kind of peace offering. Leah sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a dry flannel shirt that didn't belong to her. Her uniform had been washed and hung to dry near the fireplace. Her damp hair was pulled back, her eyes clear now, but guarded like someone who'd learned to expect everything good to vanish before it had a chance to stay. Eli set a plate down in front of her. You don't have to eat, he said. But you should. She stared at the eggs and toast for a beat too long, then finally murmured, Thank you. Maya came padding into the room, still in her fuzzy unicorn pajamas. She stopped beside Leah's chair, her voice small. Do you want to sit next to me at breakfast? Leah blinked. Sure. And just like that, Maya grabbed her hand and led her to the booth-style bench by the window. It was such a simple thing. But Eli watched it happen, like a man watching spring return to land he thought would never thaw. Later, when Maya had gone to school and the quiet settled again, Leah stood at the door, sack of wood, now empty, resting beside her feet. She turned to Eli. I can't stay. You can, he said gently. But I get why you feel like you shouldn't. Leah hesitated, fingers tightening around the strap of the sack. They died because of a bad call. My call. I was their CO. I should have seen the trap. Eli leaned against the frame of the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, but not confrontational. You made a decision in combat. You survived. That's not a crime. No, but it feels like one, she said, quietly. There was silence between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, stretched between two people who had both stood at the edge of what couldn't be undone. She dropped her eyes. People call it survivor's guilt, but it's more than guilt. It's identity. I don't know who I am if I'm not the girl who carries ghosts. Eli stepped closer. Then maybe you're someone who carries memory, and there's a difference. Leah looked up. What difference? He smiled sadly. Guilt is weight, memory is purpose. One drags you down, the other gives you roots. She stayed another night. Not because he asked, but because no one did. And that alone made the decision feel like her own. That evening, Leah sat on the back porch, watching the sky turn the soft lavender of late autumn dusk. Maya was playing with chalk on the pavement, drawing stars and stick-figure soldiers with square helmets. Eli brought out 2 mugs of chamomile tea and sat beside her, setting one near her knee. I'm not trying to fix you, he said. Leah didn't look at him. Good. I'm just saying, if ghosts are heavy, maybe they're easier to carry when someone walks beside you. Leah sipped the tea and considered that. Her voice was quiet but steady. There was one. The youngest. We called him Sparrow. He was only 16 when he joined. Nobody asked why. We just let him in. He used to whistle all the time, even when the food was cold, even when the shelling was close. He whistled like he believed we'd make it out. Eli waited. She rarely told stories. This was new. Leah continued, eyes far off. He died holding my hand, and I still hear the whistle sometimes like wind through pipes. Some nights I think it's just my guilt playing tricks. Other nights... She trailed off. Other nights, Eli said softly, "You wonder if he's still walking beside you." She nodded. Just once, Maya joined them on the porch, plopping down between them. She held up her chalk drawing. "This is you," she pointed at a stick figure with a big backpack. "And this is all the people you carry. See, they're smiling. Not sad." Leah stared at the child's sketch. Something in her chest shifted just a little. "That's really beautiful," she said. Maya grinned. "Daddy says people who remember others are like bridges, so the past can cross safely." Eli chuckled. "I said that once, maybe twice." "You said it while fixing the faucet," Maya replied, proud. Leah looked at the two of them. This strange, simple little family who didn't ask her to prove she was worthy. They just made space. Space to hurt. Space to rest. Space to not talk. Maybe that was the first real gift anyone had given her in years. That night, Leah stood by the fireplace staring at her uniform drying on the rack. She traced the faded name tag stitched over the heart. Monroe. Eli appeared behind her holding a folded quilt. "Spare blanket," he said. "I figure it's less itchy than dignity." She smirked, and it was the closest thing to laughter she'd made since she got there. Then she surprised them both. "Can I stay another night?" He nodded. "Stay as long as you need." "No," she said softly but clearly. "Just one more. For now." Eli smiled. Leah held the quilt to her chest, then looked back at the fireplace. "I think maybe. I'm tired of carrying them alone." At 3:17 a.m., Leah woke with a start. The room was dim, just the soft orange glow from the dying fireplace dancing against the wooden walls. The quilt had slipped off her shoulder, her skin cold with sweat. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the small lamp, the framed photo of a woman with kind eyes beside a little girl, Emma and Maya, and the faint sound of Eli's steady breathing from down the hall. And she remembered. She was not on a cot, not in a barrack, not under fire. She was safe, but her hands, they were clenched in fists, fingernails dug deep into her palms. Her body still hadn't caught up with her mind. She let out a shaky breath and reached for her boots. By the time dawn softened the sky into shades of blue and pearl, Leah was already outside. She stood barefoot on the damp grass, wrapped in Eli's flannel, again her breath curling in the cold air, like smoke from an invisible fire. The backyard was still save for the quiet rustling of leaves. The wooden fence was worn ivy creeping through one side. A tire swing swayed gently from the maple tree, like it too remembered simpler times. She closed her eyes and tried to picture her unit. Red, always laughing. Miles, who never let anyone eat alone. Donovan, who wrote poems in a notebook he thought no one knew about. And Sparrow, the kid with a grin too wide for the world he lived in. Their faces flickered like dying lanterns. Leah whispered all 12 names one by one into the wind. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Eli stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee. "I figured you'd be up." She turned, accepted the cup. "You always up this early?" He shrugged. Used to make coffee at 5 a.m. every day for Emma before her shifts. Old habits die hard. They stood in silence for a beat. Then Leah said, You don't ask a lot of questions." "I will," he said. "Just not the ones you're not ready to answer." She glanced at him. "You're not like other people. I'm too tired to be other people." She gave a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. Inside the day began slowly. Maya chattered through her cereal, excited about library day at school. Leah packed the girls' lunch without being asked, a kind of muscle memory from a life she never had. "You don't have to do that," Eli said, noticing. "I know," Leah replied, sealing the sandwich bag, "but it felt normal." He nodded. Normal. That word had weight. When Maya left with her backpack bouncing behind her, the house felt quiet again. Leah wandered the small hallway, noticing little details. She hadn't before: the drawing of a fire truck. Maya must have made the row of coats by the door, the smell of old books and lavender from the guest room. She found herself pausing at a cracked door. Inside the room was spare, tidy, but warm. A dresser, a chair by the window, and a bookshelf stacked with worn paperbacks. There was a photo on the nightstand. Emma again, this time with Eli. She was smiling. Not the kind of smile for the camera, the kind people give to someone they know sees all their rough edges and loves them anyway. Leah sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo. Then she whispered, "How did you survive it?" Eli found her there 20 minutes later. He didn't knock, just leaned against the doorframe. "She died in the second winter," he said. "Pneumonia. I kept thinking I should have seen it coming. I should have done more." Leah didn't move. "I burned everything I couldn't bear to look at." Eli continued. Her coats, her tea mugs, even the slippers she wore to the mailbox. "But I couldn't burn the books. Or the smell. Some things stay whether you want them to or not." Leah finally looked up. "Did it ever stop hurting?" "No," he said. "But it changed shape, became something quieter, less sharp. I don't know how to live without the weight," she admitted. "It's like grief became my compass." Eli stepped in, sat in the chair across from her. "Maybe the point isn't to throw it away. Maybe it's to learn how to carry it without letting it crush you." She stared at him for a long moment, then said, "You talk like someone who lost more than a wife." Eli didn't flinch. "I lost myself for a while. But Maya needed someone to show her that even if love dies, kindness doesn't have to." That afternoon they sat in the living room folding laundry, an odd domestic kind of peace. Leah picked up one of Maya's shirts, soft and faded. "You're a good father," she said quietly. "I'm trying. That's more than most ever do." She hesitated, then added, "My dad left when I was 8. My mom worked 2 jobs. I learned early how to be quiet, how to disappear." Eli looked at her. "You don't disappear here," he said. "You matter, just by being." Leah's throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her, not even the ones who died. That night, as the fire flickered low, Maya curled up on the couch beside Leah and asked, "Did you ever have a best friend?" Leah paused, then said, "I had 12. Maya blinked. 12. Leah smiled just a little. They were all different, but they were mine. Maya tilted her head. "Where are they now?" Leah looked into the fire, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're in the wind, the stars, the wood. They're part of me." Maya reached out and held her hand. "You can be part of us now." And somehow, that tiny gesture, that little girl's innocent offering, weighed more than all the grief Leah had ever carried. Only this time, it didn't crush her. It held her up. The first frost of the season settled like lace on the windowsill. Outside, the trees surrendered the last of their golden coats, and inside Eli's garage, the air smelled of cedar motor oil and something older memory. Leah stood in the doorway, arms crossed over the sleeves of Eli's worn flannel, watching him rummage through a battered storage cabinet, with labels half peeled and scribbled in faded Sharpie. He'd promised to help her find a dry place to store the sack of carved logs, a temporary home, until she figured out what came next. You keep everything she said, not accusing, just observing. I'm a sentimental janitor, Eli replied, tossing aside a tangled mess of Christmas lights. We're the worst kind. Leah smirked and stepped farther in her boots, echoing lightly on the concrete. In the corner, a set of dusty boxes caught her eye, one labeled Emma. Private in neat handwriting. Do you mind if I? Eli looked up, followed her gaze. For a moment something flickered behind his eyes. Then he nodded. Go ahead. Leah crouched, carefully pulled the lid off the top box. Inside were books, some journals, a few perfume bottles long dried up, and a bundle of old envelopes tied with a ribbon. Her fingers lingered on them. They smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. She untied the ribbon and scanned the return address. Fort Carson Community Home for Military Youth. Her breath caught. Eli, do you know what this is? He shook his head. Emma never told me much about her volunteer work before we met. She just said it gave her more than she ever gave it. Leah pulled one envelope out and opened it slowly. The letter inside was dated nearly 16 years ago. The handwriting was delicate but sure, the kind of penmanship that only belongs to teachers' grandmothers or women who wrote from the heart. To the child I once held in a hallway full of silence. If you're reading this, maybe you remember. You had a fever. You were scared. You didn't speak. But you clung to me like I was your anchor. I was just a volunteer that day, but I carried your face in my heart for years after. Sometimes I wonder where you are now. I hope someone held you again. I hope the world got softer. But if it didn't, and if by some miracle you find this, you're not forgotten. Not by me, Emma Brooks. Leah couldn't move. She stared at the paper, her eyes welling up, heart pounding like a drumbeat from another life. I remember her, she whispered. Eli stepped closer. You'd do. I was 8. Sick. Scared. I hadn't spoken in days. But she smelled like lavender and honey. She held me so tight I forgot where I was. Leah shook her head slowly, her voice hollow with awe. I never knew her name. But I never forgot how she made me feel. The silence between them now wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Like the house itself was holding its breath. Eli knelt beside her, picked up the envelope she'd dropped. She must have kept writing, he said. Just in case. Leah ran her fingers over the letter again. She remembered me. She remembered all of you, he said softly. That night, Leah sat alone on the porch. Swing the letter tucked into her coat pocket, the stars sharp above her in the November sky. She could still smell the lavender faintly, as if Emma had just stepped out of the room. Eli came out with a blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders without a word, then sat beside her. She finally broke the silence. I think I spent years believing I wasn't worth holding on to, that I was a burden people set down when things got heavy. Eli didn't interrupt. But this, she touched her pocket. It's like she saw through all of it, through the walls, through the silence, and still said, you matter. She did that for me too, Eli said. Every day. Leah looked at him. Really looked. The way his jaw tightened when he said her name. The way he still left Emma's books untouched, even as he invited someone new into his home. The way he never filled her closet. She was incredible, wasn't she? Leah asked. Eli smiled gently. She was the kind of person who left warmth in places she'd never return to. Leah closed her eyes. She's why I stayed last night. I don't think I could have said yes to a stranger. But not to her. The following morning, Maya found Leah standing in the backyard, the sack of wood open at her feet. She was pulling out each carved log gently like relics. What are you doing? Maya asked. I'm thinking, Leah said, about what comes next. Are you going to burn them? Leah paused. I was. That was the plan. Maya frowned. But their names. I know. Maya crouched beside her and pointed to one of the logs. What's this one say? Sparrow, Leah answered, her voice soft. Like the bird. Leah smiled. He was the youngest. He used to whistle like one. He said it made the bombs seem smaller. Maya picked up the log carefully, then looked at the garden bed nearby. Can we plant it? Leah blinked. Planet. Daddy says wood helps soil. What if we make a garden for them? Then their names don't disappear. Leah looked down at the logs, the years of grief, the names, the pain. All the weight she'd carried. Maybe it didn't have to be set on fire to be set free. Maybe we could, she said. Can I help, Leah? Smiled the first real unguarded smile since she arrived. You already are. It was the first Saturday morning that Leah didn't flinch awake. The house was still sun-filtering softly through the thin kitchen curtains, carrying with it the familiar scent of maple syrup and frying bacon. Eli moved with quiet efficiency, barefoot in jeans and a worn t-shirt, flipping pancakes, while Maya set the table with the same enthusiasm she brought to coloring books. Leah stood by the window, arms folded, watching the backyard. The sack of logs sat just where she'd left it, half open, some pieces already removed. Others still inside, resting like slumbering names. The idea Maya had voiced yesterday, planting them instead of burning them, hadn't left her mind since. But it was one particular piece she hadn't dared to touch again. Sparrow. She had left it in the center of the pile, the name carved just slightly crooked, because he'd died before she could finish. The letters stopped mid-curve, unfinished, like his story. Leah took a deep breath and stepped out the back door. The morning air held the crispness of approaching winter, but the sun warmed her skin. She knelt beside the sack and reached in, fingers brushing across the familiar texture of oak and pine until they closed around it. That log. The unfinished name. She pulled it out slowly. Sparrow had been 16. Not old enough to vote, not old enough to rent a car, but old enough to carry a rifle to shield a fellow soldier, to whistle in a war zone. He had died with his hand in hers. She remembered the warmth slipping away. If you ever get out, he had said, gasping, whistle for me. She had never whistled again. Leah sat cross-legged on the grass, the log resting in her lap. Her fingers traced the grooves in the wood, her breath catching. A year ago she would have thrown it into a fire, watched the name vanish in smoke. Now she couldn't even let it touch the dirt. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Eli walked over, a mug of coffee in each hand. He sat beside her on the grass, without saying a word, offered her one. She accepted. I was going to burn it, she said, finally, eyes still on the log. But this one doesn't want to go. Then don't make it, he replied gently. Some names were meant to stay. She looked at him. I thought burning them was the way to say goodbye, to let go. Eli took a sip. Maybe. Or maybe it was just a way to not feel them anymore. Leah exhaled slowly. I don't know what to do with this weight if I can't throw it into a fire. Then maybe Eli said we build something with it instead. By mid-afternoon, the backyard was alive with quiet movement. Leah, Eli, and Maya had cleared out a patch near the fence line, a bed of soil where weeds had once grown wild. Eli brought out his tools. Stakes twine a small spade, and Maya fetched tiny seed packets from the kitchen drawer, relics of gardening projects long abandoned. Leah knelt beside the soil and for the first time gently pressed one of the named logs into the earth. Miles. She whispered his name as the dirt covered him like a benediction. Next came Red Donovan, and the rest, each one planted with care, like they were roots of something that might still bloom. Last was Sparrow. Leah hesitated, then looked to Maya. Would you help me with this one?" Maya nodded solemnly, taking the log in her small hands. "Where do we put him?" Leah scanned the space, then pointed to the center of the patch. "Right here." He was the heart. Together they planted the final log. Eli hammered in a small wooden sign nearby, hand-lettered by Maya Garden of Names. Leah stared at it chest tight. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "We didn't," Eli said. "You did." That evening after dinner, they returned to the garden as dusk fell. Leah lit a single candle in a glass jar and set it in the center of the soil, just above Sparrow's name. "I used to think remembering them would break me," she said, her voice steady now. "But I think forgetting them would have been worse." Eli stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Sometimes the best way to honor the fallen is to keep building something they'd be proud of." She turned to him. "Do you ever feel like it's too late to start over?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced down at Maya, who was now sitting cross-legged near the candle, humming softly, tracing the names in the dirt with her finger. "It's never too late to grow something," he said. "Even from broken things." Later, as Leah lay in the guest room, her window cracked open to the cool night air. She listened. There was no gunfire, no screaming, no bombs, only wind. And just for a moment, just as she closed her eyes, she thought she heard whistling. The first sprout came without warning. It was a thin green shoot, fragile as a thread pushing its way out of the soil above Donovan's name, just 6 days after Leah and Maya had planted the logs. It caught Leah off guard one morning. It wasn't there the next. It was reaching upward like it had always meant to. She stared at it, crouched low, the early December air biting her skin, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled with no hesitation. "Look at you," she whispered. A few feet away, Maya skipped across the yard, dragging a small watering can behind her. "Is it growing? Did Donovan wake up?" Leah looked at her with that peculiar softness only Maya could pull from her. "I think he's just stretching," Maya giggled, then leaned down beside her. "Maybe he's looking for Sparrow." Leah's smile flickered, but she nodded. "Maybe." That weekend they added more to the garden. Eli built a low wooden border around the bed, nothing fancy, just enough to mark it as sacred ground. Leah hand-painted each of the names on small wooden stakes, pressing them gently into the earth above the logs. Red, Miles. Sparrow, Junebug. Duck, Marshall. Lenny, Brielle. Hawk, Donovan. Izzy, Easton. 12 names, 12 pieces of her heart. And for the first time she wasn't trying to hide the cracks. She was letting the light in. Inside the house, things changed too. Leah found herself humming in the kitchen while she rinsed dishes. She started folding the laundry before Eli could ask. One night, she stayed up helping Maya with a school project, building a diorama of Abraham Lincoln's log cabin, and accidentally fell asleep with glitter on her cheek. Eli noticed all of it, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. One cold Tuesday evening, Leah found herself sitting alone at the kitchen table, flipping through one of Emma's old journals. It was filled with neat, cursive, soft doodles. In the margins, a quiet life recorded with patience and grace. Halfway through the journal, she stopped on a page. It read, "Love doesn't always come roaring in. Sometimes it arrives on tiptoe, like a child with bare feet, afraid to wake the past. And when it does, let it." Leah closed the book and rested her hand over her chest. There was something blooming there, too. That weekend, Eli brought home a packet of wildflower seeds from the hardware store. He placed them on the kitchen counter without ceremony. "I thought the garden could use a little color." Leah picked up the packet. "You sure it's not too late in the season?" "Not for these," he said. "They bloom late, like stubborn hearts." She raised an eyebrow. Was that aimed at me? Eli just smiled, walked away, planting the seeds became a ritual. Each afternoon, Leah and Maya would add a handful to the soil, whispering the name of the soldier they hoped would bloom first. Red loved loud things, Maya said one day. He'd want bright flowers. Izzy hated bees, Leah replied. She'd probably roll her eyes at all this. But she'd like the colors, Maya said, nodding. Yeah, Leah agreed. She would. Each name grew richer, not just symbols of loss, but stories, personalities, quirks. They became real in Maya's world, and maybe just maybe real again in Leah's. On the 10th day, the first bloom opened. A bright yellow wildflower with soft white edges, tiny and unassuming, but radiant in the grey of winter. It grew from the spot-marked sparrow. Leah didn't speak when she saw it. She just knelt beside it, hand pressed lightly against the soil, head bowed. Eli found her there later, long after the sun had dipped. "He's still whistling, isn't he?" he said. She nodded. Yeah, that night, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Maya asleep on Leah's lap, Eli flipping lazily through a paperback. Leah broke the quiet. "I've been thinking," she said, "about staying. Not just another night. Longer." Eli didn't look up. He didn't need to. "Good," he said. "We have room." She hesitated, watching the flames flicker. "But I don't want to stay as a guest." Eli finally looked at her, his expression unreadable but gentle. "I don't see you as one." Leah held his gaze. "It's been a long time since I belonged somewhere." "Then maybe," Eli said, setting his book down, "this is the place that remembers how to welcome you back." Later, after Maya had been tucked in and the house had grown quiet, Leah stood alone by the garden. The wind picked up, rustling the dried grass, carrying the scent of earth and pine. She closed her eyes, listening, and just for a moment, not imagined, not dreamt, she heard a whistle. Clear, bright, defiant, a single note cutting through the dark. She opened her eyes, heart full and aching, and whispered, "I'm still carrying you." But this time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like flight. The snow arrived like a quiet apology, soft, persistent, and without drama. By mid-December, the Garden of Names wore a thin, shimmering veil of white. The flowers had withered, as wild things. Must. But Leah didn't mourn them. What mattered was beneath the surface. Now roots deepening, holding fast, refusing to be forgotten. She had grown familiar with silence again, but not the kind that hurt. This silence held warmth, like the hush of snow falling outside a window, or the weight of a child's hand resting in yours. Life had become, in its quiet way, bearable. Then came the knock. 3 firm raps on the front door that startled the air out of the room. Leah looked up from the floor, where she was helping Maya with a jigsaw puzzle. Eli, still drying dishes in the kitchen, paused, eyebrows lifting. "You expecting someone?" he asked. "No," Leah said. She stood wiping her hands on her jeans and crossed the living room. The knock came again, not urgent, but not friendly either. When she opened the door, cold wind swept in, and with it, Sergeant William Madsen. Tall, broad-shouldered in civilian clothes, but unmistakably military. Grey at the temples, steel in his eyes. He looked at her like she was both a stranger and a reckoning. "Sergeant Monroe," he said. Leah's spine stiffened before she could stop herself. "Sir." Madsen gave a curt nod. "Mind if I come in?" She didn't answer. Eli appeared behind her voice level. "We're just finishing dinner." "Everything all right?" Madsen glanced at him, then back to Leah. "I won't stay long." Leah stepped aside. They sat in the living room, Leah perched on the edge of the armchair like she might need to run. Maya had gone to her room. Eli stood nearby, arms crossed. Madsen cleared his throat. "I was in Kansas City for a Veterans Council event. Heard your name. Had to see it for myself." Leah stared at the floor. "What do you want, sir?" "You disappeared," he said. After the hearing, after they discharged you quietly. No appeal. No closure. She looked up. There wasn't anything to appeal. I made bad call. My people died. They followed your command, Madsen said, tone sharpening. They believed in you. So did I. Then you were wrong, she replied, her voice flat. Madsen leaned forward. I read your statement. I read the field logs. You were under fire. You had to choose. No one blamed you. I blamed me. A long pause. Madsen's voice softened. We all carry ghosts, Monroe. The question is, are you building a house for them, or a prison for yourself? Eli spoke, then low and steady. She's building a garden. Madsen turned to him. A what? Eli pointed through the frosted window. In the yard. 12 logs, 12 names. She buried them, planted wildflowers, told stories, built something out of what broke her. Madsen blinked. He turned to Leah. Is that true? She nodded. Why, Leah's voice was quiet but firm, because burning them felt like erasing them. And I wanted something that could grow. Madsen sat back slowly. God, he said. They'd have loved that. Later, after he left, after handshakes and the faintest flicker of something like forgiveness, Leah stood at the window, arms crossed. Eli joined her. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I think I needed that. Not his permission. Just the confrontation. Eli was quiet for a moment. You ever think maybe the ghost that stayed behind wasn't one of them? Leah looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it was you. Still stuck in that desert. Still kneeling beside Sparrow. Still holding on to the guilt like it was the only proof you loved them. Her throat tightened. Maybe she said, but I'm here now. You are, he said. And you're not fading anymore. That night, Leah walked into the garden with a candle in hand. The wind was sharp, but she didn't flinch. She knelt by Sparrow's marker, lit the candle, and whispered, I saw him. He asked if I was still there. I told him no. The flame flickered, held steady. Leah closed her eyes, then opened her palm. Inside was a dog tag, weathered edges, worn. Sparrow's real name scratched faintly into metal. She buried it beneath the snow. Not as a goodbye, but as a beginning. The rain returned without thunder. It wasn't the violent, bone-soaking storm that had brought Leah to Eli's doorstep weeks ago. This was different, gentle, persistent, like the sky had decided to cry in private. She stood on the back porch with her arms wrapped around herself, watching the droplets darken the soil of the Garden of Names. A candle flickered in a mason jar at the center, its flame dancing behind foggy glass, defiant against the drizzle. Eli stepped out beside her, 2 steaming mugs in hand. Thought you might need this, he said, offering her one. Leah took it. Thanks. He looked out at the garden. They say rain helps things settle. Roots grab deeper when the ground's soft. She gave a half smile. That sounds like something your wife would have written in her journal. Eli chuckled. It is. Emma used to say rain isn't sad, it's soil therapy. Leah sipped the coffee and said nothing. Her eyes stayed on the garden. Around midday she slipped on her boots and went out into the rain. She didn't bother with her coat. She moved through the mud, in silence, stopping at each wooden marker, gently brushing aside damp leaves and debris. When she reached Sparrow, she crouched low, her fingers resting just above the earth. Today's the first day I'm not afraid of remembering you, she whispered. Behind her, the screen door creaked. I figured you might be out here, said Eli. She looked over her shoulder. He had brought a second blanket draped over his arm like an offering. I didn't want to interrupt, he said. You're not. He walked closer, knelt beside her. This garden, it's changing more than just you, he said quietly. Maya talks to them like they're old friends. I caught her reading her bedtime book out loud to Red last night." Leah smiled. Eli hesitated, then added, "I think Emma would have loved this. She believed grief should be turned into something that feeds the living. She was right," Leah said. "It's the only way to survive it." Later that afternoon, Leah stood at the edge of town, outside a low brick building she hadn't seen in years. The Travis Memorial Youth Shelter, one of the many places she'd drifted through as a teenager. The sign was faded, the paint chipped, but the place still stood. She walked inside. A woman in her 60s sat behind the front desk reading a paperback with a bright yellow cover. "Can I help you?" she asked, glancing up. "I'm not sure," Leah said. "I used to live here, long time ago." The woman's expression softened. "Name Leah Monroe." Recognition flickered. "You were the quiet one. Barely said 2 words your first month." Leah laughed, surprised. "Yeah, that was me." The woman stood. "I'm Carol. I used to help in the kitchen." Leah's voice caught. "You used to hum when you stirred soup." Carol smiled. "I still do." Leah walked slowly around the common area, eyes tracing the walls, the furniture, the cracks in the floor. Everything was smaller than she remembered. "I've been thinking about starting something," she said suddenly. "A space, for kids like I was, and for soldiers who come home carrying more than they can hold." Carol watched her carefully. "A shelter." "No, not just shelter. A place to plant things, build things, remember things." "Like a garden," Leah smiled. "Exactly like a garden." Back home, the rain had finally stopped. Eli was in the garage, tinkering with a rusted metal bench he'd salvaged from the school dumpster. He looked up when Leah walked in, her hair damp, eyes alight with something he hadn't seen before. "What's that look?" he asked. "I have an idea." He raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous words." "I want to build something bigger," she said. "Not just this garden. A space where people who carry grief can come and do something with it." Eli nodded. "I'll help." "I know." She stepped closer. "You always do." There was a pause. Then softly she asked, "Do you think I'm still broken?" Eli set his wrench down. "No," he said. "I think you were broken. And then you turned your cracks into windows." Leah blinked. "That's a hell of a thing to say." He smiled. "Stole it from a poem." "Don't tell Maya." She laughed, the kind that started in the chest and stayed warm all the way down. That evening they had dinner on the porch, mismatched bowls, simple soup. Maya's laughter in the air like wind chimes. Afterward, as twilight pulled its blue blanket over the sky, Leah walked to the garden and lit the candle again. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Each flame was now a choice, not a ritual. As she stood there, arms folded, wind brushing through her hair, Eli came beside her. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, solid and present. She looked at him. "What if I stay?" He didn't move. "Then we build," he said. "Whatever comes next." The wind picked up again, not harsh, just enough to make the candle dance. Leah watched it, then whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." And this time she meant it. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows like a gentle tap on the shoulder, as if the day itself was nudging Leah awake. The air smelled of cinnamon vanilla and something else she couldn't place until she stepped barefoot into the kitchen. Maya stood on a step stool licking batter from her finger. Flour dusted her pajama sleeves. Eli stood beside her flipping pancakes with a theatrical flair, humming off-key to a country song on the radio. Leah rubbed her eyes. "What's all this?" Eli turned, spatula in hand. "You tell us." Leah blinked. "Tell you what Maya hopped down. It's your birthday." Leah stared at them, stunned. No, it's not. That was..." She paused, thinking. Her throat tightened. "I forgot." Eli smiled gently. "We didn't." She sank into a chair at the table, dazed. Birthdays had long since become days she avoided, days when names whispered louder and memories pushed harder. But this morning felt different. A small cake sat on the table, modest, homemade, with 12 tiny candles, unevenly spaced, like a child had placed them there with care. Maya skipped to the center. 1 candle for each of your friends. Leia looked up. 12, Maya nodded. You told me their names. So we remembered them too. Eli placed a mug of coffee in front of her. We figured you never had a birthday with all of them at once. So we brought them back. Leia couldn't speak. She stared at the candles, the flickering flames reflecting in her eyes like stars. After a moment she whispered, Thank you. Eli pulled out a small box from behind his back and set it gently beside her plate. What's this? Just something to keep close. Leia unwrapped the box carefully. Inside was a wooden pendant, smooth and simple, carved from the same kind of wood as the logs in the garden. The initials LM were etched on one side. On the back, a single word, home. She held it in her palm, the wood warm from Eli's hand. Maya beamed. Daddy made it with his fancy tools. Eli shrugged. Don't tell the school I borrowed their woodshop sander. Leia laughed, a full, open laugh that surprised even herself. It sounded like release. She held the pendant to her chest. I never had a birthday where I wanted to stay, she said softly. Until now, later that afternoon, Eli brought out a bundle of weathered photographs and scattered them across the coffee table. Thought you might want to tell us more about them, he said. The 12. Leia hesitated, then nodded. One by one she lifted each photo, some bent at the edges, some barely visible from sand and sweat, and began telling stories. Red had a tattoo of a squirrel holding a grenade. He said it was for good luck. It never worked. Maya giggled. Junebug snored like a diesel truck. We used to throw socks at her tent. Donovan always carried lemon drops in his pocket. He gave me one before every patrol. Said they calmed the nerves. Story by story, memory by memory, the room filled with people who weren't there, but somehow were. Not shadows, not anymore, but echoes wrapped in laughter. As dusk fell, the 3 of them walked out to the garden together. The snow had melted just enough to reveal patches of dark earth and resilient stems beginning to peek through again. Leia knelt beside Sparrow's marker. She placed the wooden pendant on the ground, resting it like an offering. This was never about saying goodbye, she said aloud. It was about remembering how to live. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. Maya added a folded note beside the pendant, a childish drawing of all 12 names under a rainbow with a stick figure Leia in the middle. She's the strongest, Maya had written in bright red crayon. Because she remembers everyone. That night, as they cleaned up, Eli opened the kitchen cabinet and pulled out a dusty bottle of sparkling apple cider. I saved this for something special, he said, popping the cork with a smile. Leia raised an eyebrow. Are you celebrating me getting older? No, he said. I'm celebrating you coming back. They toasted mugs clinking softly in the quiet house. To the ones we love, Eli said. To the ones we lost, Leia added. And to new birthdays, Maya chirped. Leia looked around the table. For the first time in years, the word birthday didn't feel like a deadline. It felt like a beginning. When they finally turned out the lights, Leia stood alone in the hallway, staring at the photo of Emma still hanging by the door. She whispered, You knew I'd find my way here, didn't you? The house creaked in the wind. A gentle sound. Familiar. She touched the frame. Thank you for saving me before I even knew I was lost. That night, Leia dreamed. Not of war, not of loss, but of a table set for 13 candles, flickering laughter echoing, and 1 seat left empty, not for someone gone, but for someone still on the way. Because this was not the end. This was what healing looked like when it stayed. The first letter Leah sent was simple. 4 sentences typed on old stationery she found in the back of Eli's desk drawer. The words were careful, but not afraid. She addressed it to the director of a transitional center for at-risk veterans in Wichita, a place she'd once considered sleeping outside of, but never dared to enter. I am not a therapist. I'm not a hero. But I remember what it feels like to carry too much alone. I want to start something that helps others put their grief into the ground and grow something good from it. She signed it. Leah Monroe, U.S. Army former sergeant survivor. And for the first time in her life, she mailed something she hoped would be opened. 3 weeks later, a reply came. Then 2 more. By February, Leah had a stack of letters on the kitchen table, one from a nurse in Topeka, another from a retired Marine who'd lost 3 sons, and one from a pastor whose daughter served and never came back. They didn't want advice. They just wanted to be heard. And to help. Looks like you started something, Eli said one evening, flipping through the pile. Leah looked at him over her cup of tea. I didn't mean to. The best things usually start that way. Maya looked up from her homework. Can we build another garden? Maybe in a park. Leah smiled. We might need more than a shovel for that. Eli tapped a folder in front of him. That's why we applied for the grant. She stared at him. We applied, he shrugged. I sent in a proposal. Garden of Names, a living memorial project. Figured it was time you let people believe in this as much as you do. Leah blinked. You wrote a grant application without telling me. He grinned. What can I say? I'm reckless with hope. The grant came through. Not a fortune, just enough to build something small, sustainable. A second garden. This one would sit behind the old library downtown, on a plot of land the city had nearly paved over. Leah spent days walking it, imagining where each name could go, how the pathways would curve, how the benches might feel beneath a stranger's grief-heavy frame. She didn't want it to be polished. She wanted it to feel honest. Maya designed the new sign. Come as you are. Leave what you can. Leah stood in the middle of the dirt one early March morning, wind tugging at her sleeves, clipboard in hand. She turned when she heard the familiar crunch of boots behind her. Eli approached, holding 2 thermoses. You forgot your coffee, he said. I didn't, she replied, taking it anyway. I just knew you'd bring it. They stood in silence for a while, staring at the canvas of earth before them. Emma would have loved this, Eli said. I think she planted the first seed, Leah replied. The day she wrote me that letter, I didn't know existed. He looked at her. You ever think you'll leave Kansas? She shook her head. No. This town held me when I didn't know I was still breathing. A pause. Then, what about you? Eli sipped his coffee. I'm already where I want to be. That night, as they finished putting away dinner, Maya stood on a chair and tapped her glass with a fork like she'd seen adults do on TV. I have an announcement, she declared. Leah and Eli exchanged amused glances. I think you should get married. Leah choked on her tea. Eli coughed into his napkin. Maya crossed her arms. I'm serious. Grown-ups who live in the same house and love each other are supposed to be married. It's like a rule. Leah regained her composure. It's not exactly a rule, sweetheart. Maya frowned. Well, it should be. You already act like you are. Eli grinned, eyes still on Leah. What do you think? She stared at him, stunned. You're asking me now. I mean, we have witnesses, he said, gesturing to Maya and the dog curled up under the table. Leah blinked. You don't even have a ring. He stood, walked to the coat rack, pulled something small from the pocket, laid it on the table. It wasn't a diamond, wasn't gold. It was a band carved from the same wood as the Garden of Name signs. Simple, worn smooth. She picked it up. Her fingers trembled. "Did you make this?" He nodded. "From Sparrow's tree." Leah pressed her lips together, eyes shining. "It's perfect." Eli took her hand. "Marry me," he said softly. "Not because we're trying to forget, but because we remember, and we're still here." She nodded. Tears ran freely now. "I will." Maya whooped, jumping down from her chair. "Do I get to be the flower girl?" Leah laughed. "You'll be the reason there were flowers at all." That night, Leah stood alone in the backyard under the stars. The wind whispered through the branches. The markers in the garden caught the moonlight, and for a moment she could see them all. Red, Miles, Junebug, Donovan, Sparrow. Not ghosts, not grief, just names, planted deep, blooming still. The day of the wedding was not a grand affair. There were no flower arrangements flown in from out of state, no orchestra, no dress rehearsals. Just folding chairs set in a half-circle beneath the maple tree in the backyard, the faint smell of lilac candles, and the sound of laughter drifting in from the kitchen, where Maya was bossing everyone around, like a general in combat boots and glitter socks. Leah stood inside the bedroom alone for a moment, staring at herself in the mirror. She wore a cream-colored dress, not white, not lacy, just soft linen that felt like home. Around her neck was the wooden pendant Eli had carved its small etching. Home now darkened with the oils of touch and time. Her hair was pinned, simply a few loose strands brushing her collarbone. Her scars were visible. She had not covered them, neither the ones on her skin nor the ones in her eyes. They belonged. Today all of her would be seen. Downstairs the guests were arriving. Some neighbors, a few veterans Leah had kept in contact with through the garden project, even Sergeant Madsen, who showed up in a pressed suit and a sheepish grin. He brought a shovel and a potted tree as a gift. "Figured it's what you'd want," he said. Leah hugged him tightly. "It's exactly what I'd want." The ceremony was simple. Maya walked down the path, first dropping handfuls of wildflower petals like confetti, her smile wide enough to carry everyone's joy. Eli stood at the front, wearing a clean shirt and a carved wood pin in the shape of a sparrow. He looked at Leah like a man who had found something worth weathering every storm for. When she reached him, he didn't take her hands immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the old sack. Worn canvas, frayed straps, stitched seams. Leah's breath caught. "You kept it." He nodded. It carried more than just wood. He opened it gently and pulled out the final item, a bundle of small scrolls tied with twine. He handed them to her. "What are these letters?" he said. "From everyone who walked through the garden of names, veterans, children, strangers. They wrote to the ones they lost, or the parts of themselves they thought they had." Leah held the bundle to her chest. "Where did you keep them?" "In the sack," Eli said. "Figured it was time it carried something new." She looked at him, eyes welling. "You saved it." He stepped closer. "No, you did." They exchanged vows in voices so quiet that only those who needed to hear them would. Eli said, "You made room in a house full of ghosts, and somehow they all quieted when you walked in." Leah replied, "You never tried to fix me. You just stayed, long enough for me to believe I didn't have to be broken to be loved. There were no rings, only the moment. Only hands clasped like they'd never come apart again." After the ceremony, while the guests sipped cider and Maya chased butterflies with her cousins, Leah walked back to the garden. She carried the sack one final time. This time it held no weight, no burden, no names carved in grief, just letters, stories, pieces of people who had learned to remember without collapsing. She placed it gently at the base of Sparrow's tree, now nearly her height, its branches stretching like arms wide open. A new wooden plaque hung nearby. This garden was once a grave. Now, it is a beginning. That evening, Eli lit a fire in the pit, and the three of them sat wrapped in blankets, watching embers float into the stars. Maya leaned against Leah's arm. Does this mean we're officially a family? Now, Leah kissed the top of her head. We've been a family. Today just made it louder. Maya grinned. Good, 'cause I made us a name. Oh yeah, Team Lem, Leah, Eli, Maya, like a rocket. Eli chuckled. A rocket? Yeah, because we go up. Leah laughed, the kind that felt like it came from somewhere marrow deep. Then I guess we better keep climbing. Much later, long after the guests had gone, and the candles had melted down to puddles of wax, Leah stood in the doorway of the garden. The moon was high, the wind gentle. She looked at the markers, each one now softened by time roots, curling beneath them. New life, growing in every direction. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slip of paper, the last thing she had written for herself before she left the army. A list of the names, the original 12. She tore it gently. Let the pieces fall into the soil. I'm not leaving you behind, she whispered. I'm finally taking you with me. And for the first time, she turned her back to the past, not to forget, but to walk forward with it. Inside the house, Eli was waiting. There was tea on the counter, and light in the window, and the sound of Maya singing to herself upstairs, off-key, wildly free. Leah stepped inside and closed the door behind her, not to shut the world out, but because finally she was home. If this story touched something in your heart, we'd love to know. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far kindness and hope can travel. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories that heal, inspire, and remind us we're not alone, feel free to subscribe to Soul Moments Story. We'll be right here, sharing moments that matter. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take care and keep the light on.